Hey everyone, today we are going to talk about multiplying binomials together, and we've got two different types of problems that we're going to look at. The first problem is when we have two different binomials that we need to multiply together. So our first binomial here is x plus 3, our second one is x plus 1. And we're going to use what we call the FOIL method. And FOIL is just a fancy way to kind of help us remember what it is we need to do. So, what do all these letters stand for? F stands for first. And what does that mean? When we refer to first, we're talking about the first term in each binomial, meaning I'm going to multiply the x and the x together. Okay, so that would give me x squared. Okay, then the next letter is O. That stands for outside. And when we talk about the outside terms, we're referring, if you look at the four terms here, x, the 3, the x, and the 1, the two outside terms are the ones on the outside, which would be the x and the 1. Okay, so this x and this 1, we're going to multiply together. So x times 1 just gives me 1x, or x. The I stands for inside. So just like we have two outside terms, we also have two inside terms. Again, if you're looking at all four terms, it's the 2 in the middle. So I'm going to multiply those together. 3 times x gives me 3x. And then L stands for the last two terms, meaning the last term of each binomial. So 3 is the last term in this binomial. 1 is the last term in the other binomial, so I'm multiplying the 3 and the 1 together, and that gives me 3. Now, what is great about this method is that if you just follow those things, that takes care of, and I forgot to write down the word here, L stands for last. That takes care of all of the multiplication that you have to do. And now, you have a very easy step of combining those two middle terms because they're like terms, so we want to combine them. So I have 1x, I add 3 x's to it, and that will give me 4x. So my final answer then is x squared plus 4x plus 3. And that's all you have to do to multiply two binomials together. Remember, it's called the FOIL method. First, outside, inside, last. If you remember that and you remember what they each mean, you'll be able to do all of these without any problem. So let's try a few more. Let's try x plus 7 times x minus 4. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll do our FOIL. Our first two terms are the first terms in each of our binomials. So x times x gives me x squared. The outside terms refer to, if you're looking at all four terms, the ones on the outside, so the x and the minus 4. So x times negative 4 gives you negative 4x. The I stands for the two inside terms. Again, if you're looking at all four, the 2 in the middle, 7 times x gives me 7x. And then L stands for the last two terms. That means the last term in each binomial. So the 7 times negative 4 gives me negative 28. Okay, then the last thing you have to do is combine those two middle terms. So I have x squared, and then negative 4 plus 7 gives me positive 3x. And then I have minus 28. And that's my final answer. So you do have to make sure that you combine those two middle terms. Okay? Let's try one more. Let's go ahead and let's do 2x minus 5 times x plus 6. Okay, again, just because there's a 2 in front here, that doesn't change how you do anything. You're still going to follow this format. So my first two terms, I've got 2x and x. that gives me 2x squared. My outside terms, 2x times 6 gives me 12x. My inside terms, negative 5 times x gives me negative 5x. And my last two terms, negative 5 times 6 gives me negative 30. And again, I want to combine those two middle terms. So I have 2x squared, 12x minus 5x leaves me with 7x, and then minus 30. And that's my final answer. Okay, so just remember, first outside, inside, last. And if you notice, it kind of, if you put in all the little swoopies here to show you what you're multiplying together, it kind of gives you a nice little pattern, right? It looks the same in every picture. So if you can remember that, this is really what I need you to remember. The first, the outside, the inside, and the last. So that's how you would multiply when you have two different binomials. But let's talk about a different type of problem when we're actually squaring a binomial. And what I mean by that is this. If I had x plus 5 squared. Now, a lot of people's first instinct is to just say, oh, well, if I just distribute that exponent too, that I could just write that as x squared plus 25. And they think, oh, that's all I have to do, I'm all done. Well, nope, you can't do that. Okay, you can't do that. So what we need to do, so let me show you the long way to do it, and I'll show you why it doesn't come out to be this, and then I will show you the shortcut. This 2 is next to the parentheses, which means it applies to everything, which means simply this, that I have x plus 5 times x plus 5. And so if I follow my FOIL, I have first outside x times 5 gives me 5x. Then I have inside 5 times x gives me 5x. And then I have my last two terms, 5 times 5 gives me 25. And then I say, oh, well, let me just combine those two middle terms, and that gives me x squared plus 10x plus 25. See, that is different than up here, right? Here I have that extra middle term. So you cannot just square the first term and square the last term. Promise me that you won't do that, because it's never going to come out correctly. However, we do have another way that we can do this, a much quicker way than actually doing FOIL. And it only works when you're squaring a binomial. And I call it, I'll do the same problem. I call it square double square. Okay, that's my little name for it, square double square. And all I mean by that is this. You're going to square the first term, so x squared. Then you're going to multiply the two terms together and then double that answer. So 5 times x is 5x, and then I'm going to double that. So 2 times 5x. And then the last square means to square the last term, which is 25. If I multiply that 2 times that 5x, that gives me x squared plus 10x plus 25, which is exactly what we got up here by foiling it out. But we can avoid foiling when we are actually squaring a binomial. So let me show you another example. I've got x minus 3 squared. So if I follow my square double square process, square the first term, x squared. Multiply these terms together. So x times negative 3 gives me negative 3x, and then I have to double that. And then square the last term. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. So we end up with x squared. 2 times negative 3x gives me negative 6x plus 9. And that is the square of that binomial. Okay, let's do a few more. Let's try this. X plus 10 squared. If you want to pause the video and try this one on your own, give that a shot and then you can restart the video. Okay, so here's the answer. If I follow my square, double square, square the first term, multiply my terms together. 10 times x gives me 10x. If I double that, that gives me 20x. And then square the last term, which is 100. So x squared plus 20x plus 100. Now notice I didn't write that step in there. You don't have to write that. If it helps you to write it, please do, but you don't have to. You can probably just do this in your head, right? Multiply the two terms together and then double it. Okay, so what happens if we end up with something like this? 2x plus 7. So now I have this 2 in front, and sometimes that freaks people out. But you're going to follow the same method. Square, double, square. Square the first term. So 2x squared. 2x times 2x gives you 4x squared. Multiply your terms together and then double it. So 2x times 7 gives me 14x. If I double that, I get 28x. And then square the last term. 7 times 7 gives me 49. So those are two different types of multiplying binomials together. One is with FOIL method when your binomials are different, and the other one is when you're squaring a binomial, you can use the square double square method. Okay, everybody, see you next time.